Hi there, and welcome to the review of the Stargate franchise. In these podcast episodes, we'll be reviewing from the perspective of me, Layla, an avid fan of all things entertainment, and shall we say diverse perspective, for I identify as a cisgender queer woman with a physical disability who is also a licensed cognitive behavioral addiction and developmental psychologist who herself has complex PTSD, and also I'm an astrologer novice to boot, for I do believe it is all connected. To then also be born into a dysfunctional family unit, you can imagine it's been a life. What better way to utilize this unique combination of strengths to share them with the world. And that is the goal of this whole enterprise, sharing and caring. Currently, the episodes are still just reviewed by me, myself, and I, for one, am madly interested in what all y'all think about the following. So, as I believe the arts are humanity's greatest gift, for it allows us to experience and tap into the realm of infinite possibilities, let's get started. Today we'll be reviewing Cor-ai, the 16th episode of Stargate SG-1. The original air date was January 23rd, 1998, which means that there was almost a 3-month gap between the 15th and the 16th episode. Now that's what I call a Christmas break. Does anyone know why that was? Was that for the studio execs to decide whether or not to continue on this amazing journey with Stargate SG-1? Either way, we won. We got 10 more years, but still, that is a giant mid-season break. The current episode that we are reviewing, Cor-ai, was written by Tom J. Assel, the only episode of Stargate SG-1 written by him, and the episode was directed by, once again, Mario Azzopardi, although this is the last episode of Stargate SG-1 that he directed, but he would return to the Stargate franchise 6 years later to direct the Stargate Atlantis episode, 38 Minutes, and that is a good episode. This dude is a great director. I don't know why he left Stargate SG-1, because that dude can deliver. In this episode, we'll be meeting the Canadian actor David McNally, who plays Hanno. He is, as far as I can recall, the only recurring Stargate actor that has returned not once, not twice, but thrice in the Stargate franchise, twice in SG-1, once in Atlantis, though never as the same character, yet all of his characters were quite memorable, so kudos to him. And concerning the title of the episode, Cor-ai, which seems to have been a made-up word, just a heads up, there are a lot of new made-up words in this episode, which I personally love. For when you recognize these words, you are definitely a genuine fan of the franchise. It makes you a part of this universe inside of our universe. Daniel says that it's a mixture of Greek and Latin, but I tried to Google some of the words, and it don't even come near the terminology used in the episode. So my vote is made-up words, but if someone who actually knows Latin or Greek or whatever can prove me in Google wrong, then I mean it is Google. By all means, do enlighten us all. As I, for one, prefer to be accurate instead of, needing to be right. If I'm faulty in my reasoning, educate us all. How's the saying go? Like knowledge is power, but sharing knowledge is powerful? Or did I just make that up? I thought I heard it somewhere. If you know where that quote originates, let us all know, for sharing is caring. And yes, you may now sound off the nerd alert because this was definitely a nerd alert kind of thing. Maybe I should think of a little tune, jangle, to sound off when a nerd alert is coming. And considering that we have Daniel, I can only imagine there are going to be multiple. I mean, in this episode, there are a few as well. Which is why, well, not why we love him, but it's a part of why we love him. He's like a walking, talking encyclopedia of weirdness and usable fun facts, which personally I can appreciate. I too like to view myself as, well, I would never claim to be an encyclopedia. I'm not that knowledgeable, but I do believe I know a little about a lot of things, enough to make me dangerous. Well, I gotta confess, I cheat a little. Okay, a lot. I Google, but I do look at reputable sources in as much as I can. If anything, my academic education did teach me to look at what sources are reputable, and also, very important, to place credit where credit is due. So state your sources. Always. One of the more boring courses at college, but useful. And frankly, a course I think a lot of people should consider taking, seeing that we've come now to the point where fake news and actual genuine news is almost indistinguishable for the vast majority of society. I mean, it's partially why we got where we are now, because we have really gotten to the point where it's accepted that we live in a reality, which is not reality, that there are facts and then there are alternative facts. Yeah, that one still hurts my brain. How about y'all? So one of the first things that our teacher told us, lay off the Wikipedia, which is good advice overall, in general. It's not exactly reputable. I mean, anyone and everyone can shit on Wikipedia. And we all know that the tabloids are all about the clickbait, so take that with a grain of salt, always. I just like to gather information from all kinds of different sources, form hypotheses, and sift through the rubble, see what actually comes up golden. That's a whole lot of analogies smushed into one. If I lost you halfway through, understandable. Moving on. And seeing that the title of the episode is then a made-up word, of course, I was interested to see what other languages called this particular episode. For instance, the French called it le procès, meaning the trial. The Germans called it Vergeltung, meaning retaliation. The Italians called it the condanna a morte, death sentence. And, well, the Spanish and multiple other countries just adopted the name that the writers gave it and dubbed it Cor-ai. And in this episode, the Cor-ai operates on the Elizabethan era concept of guilty until proven innocent. Plus, here, they allow the wronged person, the victim, to pass the judgment on the person who has wronged them, going as far even to sentence someone to death. So, high stakes! The people in this episode, the Bursa, believe that the Cor-ai is the most just form of legal proceeding in the way that no one but the person that has been wronged can adequately define what the form of punishment may take. I mean, for me personally, I see some merit in it, and I do wholeheartedly believe that the victim or next of kin should at the very least be given a voice during the trial to really drive home the impact of someone's actions, but to let them decide what sentence gets handed down. The person, the victim, is most likely still at the start of their healing process. So to let them decide, I think oftentimes people would then make a choice that they would regret later. I mean, it's not for nothing that they say don't respond to an email or a text when you're upset. Wait until your emotions have settled a little. Because oftentimes then you adjust your perspective. You will respond from a place of clarity instead of being overwhelmed. Your thought processes influence, for they will be influenced when you're in a heightened emotion. No matter what emotion that may be, anger, fear, joy, being under the influence of substances, and hoping here I don't have to explain that one, all affects the thinking process. Basically, just being in shock is more than enough to upset the chemical balance in your brain for a long time. So to then let them make the highly impactful, possibly unable to ever undo decision making, not my first choice. Holding a trial, holding someone accountable, showing them the impact of their actions is necessary for both the victim and the perpetrator to acknowledge that what happened, and through that to start the healing process. Because both of their lives were impacted. So both of them will need to process that. For I think that is the way that someone can start acknowledging that what they did was truly hurtful and hopefully can start off their own healing process and redemption process. And I think to go full circle, that is what this episode so beautifully provides us with. It is important to remember that the accused also is still a person, which is, I think, why it is important that sentencing is not done by the victim alone or the survivors, that there should be an impartiality. For, like I've also mentioned, oftentimes perpetrators themselves at one point or another were victims of something or other in their own lives. That's not an excuse, and you should still bear consequences for your own behavior, always, but I do think it should be taken into account. And I do most assuredly think that a victim or next of kin should be allowed to speak, to be heard, to be seen and acknowledged for what they experience, and to affirm publicly that what happened to them was wrong, to hold the defendant accountable, to show them the impact of their actions. Or to even begin to change your behavior, you first need to come to grips to fully understand the consequences of your actions. For if you don't know it or you can't acknowledge that, a change in behavior is not going to come. And as a psychologist, I can testify to that. Because if there is no incentive to change, someone isn't going to change. I mean, let's be real, we humans are lazy. If it ain't broke, why fix it? I mean, hello, we just keep slamming that dopamine until we die, if we could. We are evolutionarily programmed, is that a word? I don't know. Programmed to take the easy way. It's our higher intellect that has allowed us to delay gratification and to think in the long term. At our core, we are still just goal-oriented, results-based kind of species. If we don't see a benefit in the short term or the long term, we ain't doing it, which, can help us get very far, which it has. But it can also push us straight into addiction, and let's not forget, push us right to the edge, and also tip us over. And currently we're dancing right on the edge of that precipice, and frankly, it's about 50-50 if you ask me. But I digress. Not so tiny nutshell. This is like my take. And this episode, if anything, both the TV episode as my review episode, I hope at the very least makes you think about our judicial systems, how they are set up, what would you have done if you were Hanno, Teal'c, O'Neill, General Hammond in these scenarios, and would you do it differently or similar to them? Sound off in the comments on the accompanying Instagram account. Let's review with Layla and you, and let's start the conversation. But now we've gotten way ahead of ourselves and really already delved into what this episode fully brings us. But let's start actually reviewing the episode, as in the acting, the script, the set design, the camera angles, just all of it. For there is much to be shared. Prosper, always. The episode starts off with the MGM lion roaring. And right off the bat, I have a question. Why is it only now that Teal'c recognizes the planet? In previous episodes, he seemed to know gate addresses, so it's not like that wasn't part of his job as First Prime. He knew gate addresses. Guessing then that either Teal'c missed the briefing or didn't see the gate symbols or something, for it is only now that he tells O'Neill that he recognizes this world, adding that it's often visited by the Goa'uld to harvest hosts. Understandably, that terminology upsets our little Danny boy, and well, yes, agreed. However, it does showcase how harvesters see, or can see, their flock. And it kind of does put it now in perspective when, for once, we are not the ones doing the harvesting, but the flock from which the harvest is reaped? Is that the correct terminology? And if so, case in point. For reaping could be an apt descriptor of what being made a host can be described as in you're ripped away, stuck, trapped inside your own body, or I can only imagine being a ghost stuck on this plane, having to witness the living, but no one sees you, hears you, and you're powerless to do anything. Although I gotta say, if you've seen that Comedy Central TV show Ghosts, it does have its moments. I mean, that TV show, the sexual innuendos alone make it worth a watch at least once. Whoever came up with referencing going to heaven as getting sucked off or being sent to hell as going down on us, for that alone, you deserve an Emmy or two. Just, it makes me laugh every single time, which of course is the whole point, but the point was that it doesn't appear to be all bad. I mean, it would be nice that you have some interaction going. I don't know what the afterlife holds, but that show kind of makes it look not all that bad, or at least shows that it can still have its moments. Although when you look at Supernatural, you better get sucked off or go down soon, or you turn into this poltergeist, murderous ghost. So whoever's theory holds true, we will all find out in due time. But moving on, that is not what this episode is about. Now I feel compelled to add any chance to celebrate content, shining a light on something or someone, giving credit where credit is due, allowing someone else to discover something. I mean, I discovered Hannah Gatsby on the late night show with Stephen Colbert. Odd place to start, but I am very thankful that Stephen had them on his show. They changed my life. Genuinely. Back to the episode. For this next bit, I really want to give props to the set designers because that set design is beautiful. It very clearly is a courtroom Yet, come to think of it, it's kind of odd that the rest of their society doesn't really seem to line up with that kind of architecture, but it clearly shows that this is their courthouse courtroom, and considering what's about to happen in this episode, it was very beautifully lighted, set up, just all of it. Kudos. What I really like about this episode is that throughout, points are made. Good points. Some not so good points, which we will also get to. But for instance, the moment where the townfolk sneak up on SG-1 and they all hold each other at gunpoint, crossbow point. I do like it that the man that we will soon learn is named Hano points out that how are they to know if they are friendly, for they too are armed. And yeah, I mean, pointing your gun in someone's face doesn't immediately make you think that they are, friendly. Although the fact that they didn't shoot on sight, you could say, leans more towards them being friendly, but, it never hurts to be careful. Trust but verify. And of course, it does make sense. I mean, they are armed to the teeth, being all decked out with all the knives and guns and bullets and whatever else they're hiding in all of those many, many pockets. At the same time, they have to be able to defend themselves when they go exploring into probably enemy territory, right? So for now, let's agree, seeing that no one shot on sight and we're still talking, means that we're all friendly, at least for now. And it doesn't hurt that as the one visiting, O'Neill offers to lower his gun first, which is always a good tactic if you really want to show someone that you are actually truly friendly. Maybe the cops could learn something from Colonel O'Neill's escalating tactics. Just a suggestion. And as the presumed leader of the townsfolk goes walkabout, sizing all the team members up with this look of fascination on his face, the moment that he gets to Teal'c, the dude looks pissed. And for 1 second, you could assume that it is the same reason as usual, as in, hey, he's Jafar, he's different. For we've seen that reaction to Teal'c before, but nope. This time, the writers decided to go a little further. Apparently, Teal'c and this man have history. As O'Neill and Carter and even Teal'c himself tried to explain to the man that Teal'c is peaceful, the man, Hano, clearly knows different as he calls out, and in this case as true as you can, this bold-faced lie. For when he says he knows Teal'c, he knows Teal'c. And it is very, very personal. For according to the man, Teal'c is the one that killed his father. Hot damn. I gotta say, it's admirable he didn't shoot Teal'c right then and there. And as this is quite the bombshell for the viewer, once again, great timing to now cue the show's intro tune, for it gives the viewer a time to digest this shocking nugget of information. Question. Did anyone else find it annoying that O'Neill kept referring to the man that we soon learn is named Hano as a kid? I mean, he looks like a grown-ass man to me. The actor wasn't, I kid you, pun intended, you not, because I looked it up. David McNally was 37 years old at the time of filming this. 37! Practically middle-aged. Richard D. Anderson himself was 48 at the time of filming this, and the actor Michael Shanks, who plays Daniel, was 28 at the time. So if anything, Daniel would be the kid in this scenario, but okay. Yes, this is partially rhetorical, as in I know that they did this to show that O'Neill is desperately trying to discredit whatever Hano is saying out of fear or concern for Teal'c. I know that. When someone uses derogatory, in this case, sort of terminology in trying to discredit you or minimize your voice, that is a clear sign that someone is threatened by you, and that whatever it is that you're doing or saying is perceived as a threat to them or their loved ones. So if anything, it shows that O'Neill really cares. Which, yeah, I gotta say, in this episode, he really does show that he cares. In all seriousness, though, just because someone is younger than you or not as experienced as you, for one, doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about. And for two, don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, I was born more emotionally mature than anyone else in my family, so I may be the Benjamin, but I'm emotionally more mature, and that's saying something. Yes, that is saying something. More mature than the lot of them combined. So don't count us out yet. That was just my personal observation. Moving on. And then we come upon another question this episode raised. As the Bursa men go outside to meet the elders, Daniel, once again being his curious little self, wonders if they were all coming from a religious event, like Sunday church or something. Oh, you gentle, oblivious man. Dude, they're clearly a farmer community with rudimentary weaponry. Crossbows, hello. And Teal'c already told you they get regular visits from the Goa'uld, so yeah. As we soon learn, no, they were not coming back from a religious event. Apparently, once the gate activates, the people run for cover. Smart. And it kind of makes you think, or it kind of make me think, why don't you then just move away from the gate? I mean, that thing is smack dab in the middle of your courtyard. Why move in next door when you can move, I don't know, 100 miles away? That is a question that doesn't get answered in this episode, and that is a question that I could not ignore. And with what we later learn with the gliders and the ships and all that jazz, I get it. There was no escaping. That's basically the point, and that's probably why they continued to reside around the gate, or maybe the gate supplied them with necessary goods for survival, but still, you could move a little further away, right? Or is that just me? I'm just, asking. I do so very much can appreciate that the writers now also make O'Neill call Daniel out a little bit, saying, why is it always a religious thing with you? Adding that they could have just as well come from a swap meet, and that one shouldn't make me laugh, but it kind of sort of did. Which then just goes to show where my mind went. Sorry. And yes, I'm still emotionally more mature than the rest of my family. What can I say? I swing both ways. In more than one way. I do like it that Daniel offers them help, which they clearly could use, to avoid the Goa'uld, though I noticed that that particular sentence was not captured in my subtitles. And it was quite an important offer, and it just goes to show that Stargate Command offers their help. They're not invaders and strictly come in, take whatever they need, and don't give a flying fart about the people that they meet along the way, but that they actually genuinely offer their help, even if maybe possibly there's nothing in it for them in return. I was saddened to see that the particular kind offer was not reflected in the translation, and I therefore do hope that it was in the closed captioning, because it says a lot about Daniel, Stargate Command, but as I am watching this on my DVD, it don't offer that particular option, so if you know, throw it in the comments on our Swap Media Place on Instagram. Let's review with Layla and you. Here, I do like it that for a second, you think that they are just sent home, no biggie, moving on, but then we wouldn't have this episode. So the rest of the team, yes, is allowed to leave, but not Teal'c. And of course, we don't leave a man behind. This whole sequence is where my love for the character Teal'c solidified in undying forever love. For when Hanno confronts Teal'c with the crutch from his father, and nice timing and editing of that flashback, by the way. This flashback now allows us to indeed see that the man who shot Hanno's father was indeed Teal'c. And Hanno looked him right in the eye, so to assume that his identification of Teal'c, even though it was decades ago, is accurate, I mean, do you forget the face of the man that killed your father right in front of you? I highly doubt it. We see O'Neill trying to stop Teal'c, which I do get as his superior officer and all. At the same time, having Teal'c then say that he must respond when O'Neill orders him, don't say anything. The look on Christopher Judge's face, oi, that man has skills. For you see the emotion play out on his face. You notice how his look shifts after that flashback into that of recognition and even remorse. And as Hanno then orders Teal'c to be taken into custody, I guess they did adopt that judicial word, Daniel intervenes. When O'Neill now seems to be the one that's starting to escalate shit as he cocks his gun. So he means business. And as she is supposed to do, Carter follows suit. But bless him, Daniel, our forever and always de-escalator, also one of the many reasons I love you, by the way. It all doesn't matter, for Teal'c surrenders and hands over his weapons as they then lock him in a cell. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the fact that O'Neill is clearly on one hand frustrated, but at the same time throws in these little, you could say funnies, at least it made me chuckle, like, is there an option for bail? And I mean, fair question, because we don't know anything about their judicial thingy, and some things they've dubbed differently, and other things apparently, such as custody, they have adopted. Not even to start about that, they all, once again, speak modern English, but okay. And yeah, like, the whole bail, that is just a whole judicial thingy that I won't go into that will just set off another brain fart train room. And all I can say is, if you want to know about bail, particularly how it works in, or not works, in the American justice system, I suggest you look up bail. And last week tonight, John Oliver explained that beautifully, depressingly. And if you want to learn more, which, like I said, I hope this episode does, make you think, want to learn more about how your judicial system operates. Knowledge is power, after all. For I always did see merit in the option or the decline of granting someone bail. And I mean, my issue always with it was, in which John Oliver beautifully explained, that for some, bail is peanuts. For others, it's an impossibility. And the inequality of that doesn't sit right with me. And that's all I'm gonna say about it. And there, hey, look at me. I kept that one short. Yay me! Throughout the episode, multiple times, O'Neill tries to stop Teal'c from talking, confessing, offers to basically go full jailbreak on it. I love and respect the character of Teal'c so much more every single time that he declines. For when O'Neill starts basically just prepping for a jailbreak, Teal'c refuses and says to go would disrespect the Bursa. Honor, people. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, work on it. If you do, it makes you into such a beautiful, beautiful person. I would follow to the ends of the earth and beyond. I also like about this episode, and you could call it banter or you could call it tension, but Daniel, slightly annoying though it was necessary, has a certain naivete in this episode with his as near as he can figure. Dude, really? And then O'Neill, yes, rightfully so, calling him out that a simple trial could very well be a simple beheading. And you gotta give it to O'Neill for going to that worst case scenario, because you have no freaking clue what's happening here. They have already decided. Teal'c has pretty much admitted that he's guilty. So we don't know what's gonna be happening here, and a beheading could very well be a likely outcome. We are talking murder here, which even in our judicial system is still, well, not a capital offense, but in America it is. Which then made me a little interested. Yes, here I go again. Nerd alert! What does make a capital offense around the world? What are the differentiating aspects across the globe? So I did some Googling, and a capital offense by definition means that someone has committed murder. However, it can also include treason, bribery, espionage. Who do we know reminds us of that or those? Because the dude was busy. And I mean, there are people in jail right now for that. Except the man that they all did it for. Seriously, can we lock his ass up already? I mean, what y'all waiting for? He confessed multiple times on live television. What more do you all need? But then again, he's white. He is claiming, even though we all know he isn't, to be rich. And when you have those two combined with friends, people that you bought in powerful places, you really can't get away with anything. Can we please change that already? Back to what we were talking about. What also falls in some places on this globe under a capital offense is rape. Really? Well, not everywhere. But yes, rape is a capital offense in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and China, according to Thomson Reuters Foundation News. Apparently, Bangladesh approved the death penalty for rape following a nationwide protest over an alleged gang rape as recently as in 2020. So that is not an old law, that is a new law. And, it reminded me that in my country, the Netherlands, the penalties for sexual assault are a little, shall we say, less capital offensive. As in, for sexual assault, rape, and sexual abuse, you can be sentenced to, and I shit you, unfortunately not, community service. I know, that one hurts me too. And a maximum prison sentence of 12 years. And an 82,000 euro fine. Well, don't get crazy now. And in very severe, serious cases, a prison sentence can be combined with compulsory psychiatric treatment. Yes, please. Because, yeah, there are levels, unfortunately, of disturbing, and then you have disturbing. Apparently, more than 70% of the world's countries have abolished capital punishment in their law or practice. However, the United States in this is an outlier among its closest allies in its continued use of the death penalty, according to deathpenaltyinformationcenter.org. And what are the freaking odds, as I'm recording this episode, or technically editing this episode, last week tonight, once again covered the death penalty and everything that's wrong with it for the third time in their entire history. I'm guessing it was meant to be. So yes, in addition to the bail Last Week Tonight episode, I will also be adding this new death penalty episode. For somehow, some way, we all agree that shit needs to change. I mean, even in America itself, clearly this Last Week Tonight episode showed the whole fucking reason that they want to hide which companies make the drugs and why they have so much difficulty attaining the drugs is because once people know, they won't like you. The fact that the entire clue is staring you in the face and people just keep tiptoeing around it baffles me. Like, the human mind is capable of such powerful, beautiful imagination, creating an infinite possibilities, and at the same time could be so fucking dumb. On some level, it has to be like a choice. I mean, just look at... Today I heard something about Lindsey Graham, so I'm using him as an example. Lindsey Graham, when Donald Trump became the Republican, or was looking to become the Republican candidate in 2016, said that if we let this happen, it's the end of the Republican Party, and now he's one of his biggest supporters. What the actual fuck? You know better, evidently, and still you support this man. And there I go ranting again, I'm sorry. Lordy, this episode really made me think, and shit is happening in the world, which again makes me think on that as well. So I'm sorry people, this episode is gonna be fucking long, and like long, or I'm gonna release a bonus extended version of it or something, because a lot of topics came up, and topics I think are critical to discuss and to talk about more if we are to steer away from the precipice that we are barreling towards. Like, I'm still waiting for the moment where someone just grabs the wheel and gives it a hard twist, steering us away from certain painful death and destruction, extinction, pretty much. Because I do think if we pop off, we pop off. And I'll be ashamed because some of us are working really hard to, make ourselves better so that we can make the world better. It would be such a shame if I did all this hard work for nothing. Just saying. And not just me. Like, a shit ton of people. Many of us are trying. I really wish that we would start seeing some results, though. Well, I mean, slowly people seem to be waking up to the situation in Gaza. 30,000 deaths too late, if you ask me, but, rather sooner than later. Sorta. Not really, but, yeah. And that is your not-so #fun fact on capital offense, death penalties, and judicial systems and interpretations of what one considers a capital offense and what one doesn't. My opinion kind of worries me. Some people should never, ever be released back into society, ever. Then again, yes, then what? Kill them? I'm on the fence on that one. It's more of a case-by-case assessment. I mean, there are certain people that I would not necessarily sentence to death because I still think that they could be of use, but there are certain people that I would not want released back into society, ever. Like, ever. For it has been, 30 years by now since one of our most infamous sexual predators, Marc Dutroux, was convicted for kidnapping, raping, and murdering several young girls, and that motherfucker is up for parole, or is already on parole. I don't know. I try to not look too hard into that. Up until a few years ago, I understood that not once has that man expressed any kind of remorse for what he did. And it impacted not only a community, but a generation. Like, that was one of the first sexual predators, or the first sexual predator I was made aware of. And the thought that he is or could be released, because by law they cannot hold him any longer, I find horrifying and pretty much terrifying. Because if he didn't learn anything from it and he hasn't shown any kind of remorse, who's to say that he won't just pick up where he left off? But yeah, in some instances, I wonder what to do with these kinds of people, for they will not change. They remain a threat to society, but I also am opposed to killing. That's my little segue, sorry. What do y'all think? Pro-death penalty, against death penalty, life in prison actually meaning life in prison? Let us know in the comments. Back to the episode. As the team is deliberating what to do, we see three ladies coming in and kneeling by Teal'c's cell. One woman claims that she is the Jaffa's voice for the Cor-ai, and near as we can figure, it's their version of a defense attorney, at least according to Daniel. A little side note, would it kill you to stop assuming things, or near as you can figure it, and maybe, I don't know, ask more questions? Check if you are near as you can figure in the realm of accurate? Anthropologist, Egyptologist, yes. Psychologist, no. You needs to ask questions. questions, my love, until you have all the information needed to assess the situation. The woman claims she must bear witness to Teal'c's peccavé. Love that word. And leave it to Daniel now for the instant translation. I mean, who needs Google Translate when you got a Daniel? And through O'Neill's frustration that everyone assumes that Teal'c is guilty, the woman now confirms that without guilt, there would be no Cor-ai. So technically, is it really a trial if you've already judged that the person on trial is guilty? Sound off in the comments. And then hashtag nerd fact, thank you Daniel. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is something that we now learn thanks to Daniel, our walking talking encyclopedia of weirdness, that particular concept is rare. Oftentimes it is guilty until proven innocent, and we do kind of sort of lock people up until trial, usually the poor people, where the rich can get away with an ankle monitor or sometimes even get out of jail free, not so free card. But for that, I once again refer you back to last week's tonight's John Oliver's YouTube upload. Maybe I'm going to add it in my Linktree account so you can watch it, for it is a good one. I'm going to do that. Anywho, no conversations are had concerning any form of bail, so I'm guessing that is non-negotiable. This is where O'Neill now assumes the role of being Teal'c's voice, and after some, one could say antagonistic yet oh so hilariously, tense back and forth between the other SG members, they all decide to be Teal'c's co-counsels. Which, hey, there were 3 women, now there are 3 of you, not a giant leap, and you needn't have upset your commanding officer by calling out his less than diplomatic ways. But then again, calling shit out like you know it, I love it, I need it, I respect it, just yes please. Plus, note that O'Neill doesn't argue their points. He himself is known to cut right through the bullshit and says it like it is or how it appears, and even now, though, he does seem to need some encouragement today to remember that aspect of his own personality. It is one of the reasons why I always really loved and respected the character of Colonel O'Neill. He says it like it is, and he cuts through the bullshit, and he, sometimes, not always, completely disrespects hierarchy. So to see Colonel O'Neill as a frustrated, though valiant warrior for justice on behalf of Teal'c, I mean, what better defense attorney could you possibly ask for, even especially when you're guilty? I also like that even though you see how he's trying to look away and to disregard truth, arguments that he makes are awesome, for they are true. And who better to know than someone who is a soldier himself? I do like that later in the episode, he himself refers back to his own dark, twisted, tainted history as a soldier following orders. And as always, Stargate magic, keeping us on our toes. At the start of the trial, when Hanno kneels before Teal'c and apologizes, I did not see it coming. Apparently, Hanno feels that he must apologize for losing his temper earlier, for in doing so, he shamed himself and his people. Wow. Honorable, accountable, love it! Teal'c grants him his forgiveness, which apparently causes quite a stir amongst the looky-loos. But he's nice. This whole turn of events makes O'Neill slightly optimistic, though once Hanno is handed the staff that kind of looks like a menorah, gotta love those set designers, truly, he immediately asks for the death penalty, making O'Neill valiantly, forcefully, dude should have had a role on Law & Order and then some, calling out his objection. And here I love, this whole sequence makes you think, for as Daniel and O'Neill point out that a trial ruled over by the victim's son is not fair, for that person cannot be impartial, Hanno now points out, how can anyone be truly impartial? Anyone who has a mind has an opinion. Boom! That has always indeed been my issue too with the law. It is written by man, it can't cover all the bases, and judges are tainted by their own political views and their own moral compass. I mean, just the other day, a judge ignored the jury's verdict and set a boy who confessed to rape free because the judge didn't think the boy deserved to go to jail for, what was it? I don't know, 3 years? What the actual fuck? And don't even get me started on those Supreme Court sellouts. Just, again, John Oliver, Last Week Tonight. Beautiful. If you don't regularly watch that show, I highly recommend. And if you don't have HBO Max, it's on YouTube. Educate yourself, my friends. Crucial, especially in these wackadoodle times where you can hardly distinguish between fact and fiction. Unfortunately, O'Neill's arguments on impartiality fall on deaf ears and the trial continues. Hanno inquires if Teal'c remembers him, which he does, and if he is indeed the one that killed Hanno's father, and despite O'Neill once again trying to stop Teal'c, Teal'c admits that he is, and well, that's it. 60 minutes in the episode. The end. Case closed. Teal'c's gonna die. Or is he? I gotta say, hearing that bell toll, that shot with the spotlight of Teal'c sitting down, surrounded by the team, looking all resigned, such an impactful shot. And just, I felt it. If you want to see which scene I mean, go check out my Instagram account on Let's Review with Layla and you. Next, I'm guessing there's some kind of recess because everyone seems to have left the courtroom apart from O'Neill and Teal'c, and they talk. And this entire conversation I love. For when O'Neill asks Teal'c, why didn't you tell me you were guilty? Because you knew? I so love it that Teal'c just calls him out on this to his face. Because, yeah, why else would you have repeatedly told Teal'c to shut up if you didn't already know that he was gonna confess? So, I love that they made it explicit. He does seem to take it in stride, though, and instead asks Teal'c now what really actually happened. See, Daniel, this is what I mean. You need to follow up. Really get to the nitty-gritty of it all. When you see O'Neill, and I get it, he tries to give Teal'c an out, saying that he was following orders. And yes, soldiers have to follow orders, and in doing so might do things that they don't want to, but that is a slippery slope. For then you could, and some have, said and say, the SSers were also just following orders. And currently now, the soldiers in Israel, can you really say that they were just following orders? Don't you know that bombing a hospital is wrong? And if your orders are to do that knowing that there are innocent people there, I'm sorry, in my opinion, you can't hide behind that I'm just following orders. If you don't pull the trigger, they need to find someone else. And if enough people say no, it won't happen. So in my opinion, that is not a valid excuse, but I do understand that O'Neill tries to make this point. And I love that they have Teal'c specifically say, what I did while serving Apophis, I will not hide from. Basically agreeing that even if he followed orders, does not take away the perhaps diminished accountability for your own actions that still remains even when you're a soldier following orders. You could also have said, I will not do this, and walked away, either forcing them to do it themselves or finding someone who will do what they ask. And yeah, I am well aware that that refusal can mean your own death. And yet, then your conscience at least would be clear. So which one is more important? Doing something that you will regret for the rest of your life and carry with you and, in my eyes, create karma? Or do the right thing and, I don't know, maybe get killed, but then at least you didn't have bad karma added onto the pile. If anything, someone made bad karma for themselves for what they did to you. Either way, you are shoving the responsibility for your actions onto someone else. And taking responsibility, taking accountability for your own behavior and actions, no matter what your intentions were, to me is a big ass giant deal. Mainly because in my family, taking accountability, holding people responsible seems to be a foreign concept, thus making this a major trigger for me. But that's beside the point. The point here is, when does following orders stop being okay, and when does it become a war crime? Do you even know? Where is that line for you? And to really drive his point across, Teal'c asks O'Neill, when O'Neill doesn't seem to understand why Teal'c is seemingly so willing to basically accept his death. Teal'c asks him, have you ever faced the crying eyes of a child whose father you have just murdered? And hello, that sounds like a war crime to me. The emotion on Christopher Judge's face in this scene, holy mother, give that man an Emmy. Or 20. You feel it. And this is just like the 16th episode of the first season. Like, I knew I loved Daniel, but in rewatching this show and now so focused, I'm falling in love all over again and so much deeper with Christopher Judge and Teal'c. Such a powerful performance, even though sometimes most of the talking is done by O'Neill and Daniel. But Teal'c is such a powerful character, and I think underappreciated. I underappreciated him all those years. But now rewatching it, I love that man, and I love every single thing about his performance. Just what he can convey with a look, with a quiver of his lip, just oof. Am I the only one that really loves it when they make O'Neill say the bad thing out loud? So yes, I am gonna delve a little more deeply into this. O'Neill reiterates that the whole concept of chain of command is that it undermines the idea of free will. For he now basically admits, in my opinion, that soldiers have no free will, they need to follow orders, even when that is against their own better judgment, thus making leaders of countries and armies the ones who are truly responsible, and yes, agreed. And still, they oftentimes are also the ones that don't directly have to deal with any true consequences, other than maybe after 2-3 decades having to appear in front of the International Criminal Court. BT Dubs, how's it going with the outstanding warrant for Vladimir Putin? But that's beside the point. That is entirely the point, but for now, we're skipping over that step, seeing that we don't have Apophis here right now. We will get to that later. However, I also do believe without those armies, those leaders couldn't do anything as atrocious as commit these horrible, senseless acts of violence, which is why I think they make soldiers dependent or to some extent brainwashed to do their bidding. Otherwise, how do you explain these kinds of things happening? And I mean, I've seen the videos of the Israeli soldiers and the things that they say about the children, the women, the men that they have tortured and killed. And I'm sorry, but if that's not brainwashing, then what is? They have made those soldiers hate Palestinians to such an extent that in their eyes, they're no longer human. By indoctrinating their own soldiers to no longer see the enemy as even remotely human, they can convince them to do a shit ton of awful. So therefore, as soon as someone starts to say that is need to know or tries to restrict or ban access to resources for you to figure shit out on your own, instead you are told some shit that you just have to take at face value, my advice is ask an exhaustive amount of questions to really cover your bases. One person's opinion is not the truth. Fuck 10 people's opinions is not the truth if they are all in the same bubble. Try to get information from multiple reputable sources and make your own decisions. So yes, all of this is why I take issues with chain of command, abandoning free will, and in my eyes, it never ever should come to you relinquishing your free will. For I cannot see any way, any scenario where that is a good thing. For you literally hand over your power to someone else that you then have to hope actually does something good with it. And oftentimes, it is exactly the people who ask you to relinquish your power, your free will, who are the ones who do not have your best interest at heart. At least in my opinion. For if someone truly means well without being able to follow up, I mean, trust is important, yes. I have slight trust issues considering what I've been through, I know that. But still, trust but verify. See if someone's words line up with their actions. Because someone can possibly not even intend to do harm, but people can paint you a picture of who they would like to be, but not who they really actually are. And it's very important to know the difference. Is someone actually who they claim to be? Or is someone trying but never quite living up to that image that they try to portray? For instance, Joe Biden, supposedly the leader of the free world, did a lot of good in the country, especially after Trump. Yes, agreed. Is he a better option than Trump? Always. Many people are. Let's be real. However, I cannot get past the fact that Biden actively supported Israel in committing genocide for months. And now they finally signed off on a ceasefire, but now everyone is pretty much dead or starved to death. I'm sorry, but it's too fucking late. You got everything that you wanted out of this deal, whatever that was. But the Palestinians were decimated. The vast majority of Palestinians were women and children. And I'm sorry to say, but that makes me think that both Biden and Trump are not a valid option. I don't know what America's going to be doing. Anything preferably to stop Trump. Basically, the entire administration needs to go. This entire Supreme Court needs to go. My own government is just acting like children. These are people that we supposedly elected into positions of power. We partially relinquished our will, trusting them to do the right thing. And yet, all I seem to notice is that the people with power squander it, and they only help a very specific portion of society that many of us, the vast majority of us, are not a part of. And the silly thing is, we outnumber them by a lot. And I think we are reaching that point where we need to rise up. And I always hoped that it could be done by voting, but I have been voting for damn near 20 years and it has not made a lick of difference. Mainly because the system is broken, or technically you could say it's functioning exactly as the way that they envisioned it to work, but it's not the picture that they painted us. That it's a democracy where every vote counts. Apparently not. Literally, the person I gave my vote to in this election, the only person that I thought at least didn't have any viewpoints that I strongly disagreed with, she quit that same week. So that was my vote thrown aside, and you don't hear a peep from them since the elections in November. But that was the only party I fought for education and for healthcare. Two things that are the fucking cornerstone of any remotely healthy society, where they have been slashing budgets nonstop for the past 2 decades, and with all the happenings in the world, I'd say it's pretty fucking clear we need to invest in these areas pronto, because people are being brainwashed by propaganda, by the narratives that the rich and powerful throw out into the world, and use all kinds of sneaky little algorithms to either restrict access to information or flood our feed with misinformation. We live in dire times, people, like for real. And like I said, I've been voting and it's not making any fucking dent or difference or whatever, and I work trying to help make a difference, but only getting reaffirmed again and again and again how fucking toxic the system is. I'm all out of ideas. Does anyone else have an idea, please? The dude that won our election in November, Geert Wilders, who wants to change the constitution, wants to ban the Quran. Like, motherfucker, you can't ban a religious book. And don't even get me started on banning books. If you're doing that, you are definitely on the wrong side of history. When you are afraid of people trying to educate themselves and try and verify, bitch, you know you're on the wrong side. If you were honorable and true and your point of view was just, or at least reasonable, you wouldn't have to hide or restrict access to anything. As soon as people try to avoid debate or a conversation, you know that that's because they themselves are clear that their point is not as firm as they themselves probably would like it to be. Instead of taking that as a cue to really build a firmer foundation on which to build your argument, no, instead, their solution is to cut off access for others so that they can't question your reasoning, so that they can't be on equal footing as you. Which in my eyes then makes you a sissy, lily-livered coward. Sorry, this is again. Damn it, I really wanted to try and stay on point. Okay, backing it up. This scene was difficult for me. I agree with both of them. Seeing Christopher Judge's lip quiver, like actual lip quiver, as O'Neill angrily tells him that he's gonna do all that he can to keep Teal'c alive whether he likes it or not. On some level, I think that Teal'c is grateful for O'Neill and that he's working so hard to try and save Teal'c, but at the same time you feel his deeds weighing on Teal'c, and that in every single argument that he makes, you can't but agree with, right? He has done awful things. He has committed war crimes, and his victims do deserve retribution. So this part of the episode really puts me in a split. Like, I agree with both of them. And then, like I said, I love how they continued this episode, because I'm in a stalemate here. And they beautifully finish it. Once court is back in session, they now try a new tack, for Teal'c has already confessed. They are now trying to persuade the people that despite being guilty, Teal'c doesn't deserve to die. And well chosen, for if ever there was one who knew the personal impact of Teal'c's time as his first prime to Apophis, it is Daniel. For he knows that Teal'c is the one who picked Sha're as a Goa'uld host for Apophis' queen. Which once again reminds the viewer of how fucking powerful it is that Daniel can even stand to work with Teal'c. And Daniel now, you could say, yeah, he's convincingly states that if this Teal'c could help Daniel get Sha're back, he'd do it gladly, even if it meant sacrificing himself. And I think that is one of the ways that Teal'c at least partially redeemed himself to Daniel, because Daniel really truly believes that Teal'c would do that. And that's what I mean, like, a war crime, yes, but if he can make up for it, he will. Hell, he already made good on that promise when he offered to remain behind in the labyrinth in the episode Thor's Hammer, a device able to save Sha're from her Goa'uld. So he already made good on that promise. He proved that he was an honorable man. He showed that he genuinely, sincerely meant that he would give his life. He would sacrifice his life if it meant that that way he could save Sha're and have Daniel and Sha're reunite. It doesn't excuse what he did, but by allowing him to make up for it by either preventing it from happening to someone else or undo his evil deed as much as he can, yes, that be redemption, and someone should be allowed to at least try and redeem themselves, right? I also love when Carter jumps on the bandwagon and she asks Teal'c about the moment he decided to turn on the Serpent Guards to save O'Neill and Carter and Daniel back in episode 1, the pilot, Children of the Gods, and oh, that was such a good episode. She points out that in doing so, Teal'c risked a lot. For we now know that he not only risked his own life at that moment, but he also, in doing so, left behind a family. And that moment where Teal'c takes a minute to respond and even chokes up a bit when he says that it's very likely he will never see them again. Ooh, I felt that. And it clearly, again, is such a beautiful, such a handy example to show that Teal'c really sacrificed in the choices that he made. And it's understandable that Hanno then counters that with, why could he do it with you, but not here at the time to save my father? And we all know and agree that had Teal'c then turned on Apophis, it would not have made a difference, only his own death. Does it excuse his actions? No. Does it undo what he did, making Hanno's father not dead? No. But I did like it that they made it point counterpoint. For it would be a very reasonable question, I think, a defendant would have to answer. Like, how could you resist Apophis then, but not when it would have saved someone I loved? So nice that they included that in the episode, even though we all knew the answer and the reasoning behind it. And yeah, it made Hanno's stance more believable by making all those counterpoints to the arguments that the SG team members were making. Now that Daniel does go and learn more about the Bursa and has now figured out a defense for Teal'c and asks Teal'c to really tell them what happened that day. Teal'c discloses that he was ordered to kill one to force the others into submission, something that Apophis apparently ordered him to do a lot. And also, following up, that if he didn't, Apophis threatened to kill all of the people. You can see his ethical dilemma here. And after having seen Hanno's father, you could even say he asked Teal'c to kill him for seeing that he was missing a leg and walking on a crutch. He couldn't have moved fast, thus knowing that he would be the one holding the others up, risking their lives, and apparently, the reason possibly why they got caught that day. And yet, as a disabled person, I get it, but it's also like, sure, kill the gimpy one. I know how other people with disabilities view this episode and view that particular choice in clearly showing the man is disabled to learn the Bursa don't leave anyone behind no matter how slow they walk, resulting in an increased risk of them getting captured. That he's the obvious choice. The fact even that I understand why that would make this an easier choice just goes to show how ableist even I, as a disabled person, can view this and thus still fall victim to that mindset. For a second, humor me. What if the man didn't have a disability? Would that make the choice for you easier or harder? Please explain your reasoning, for I genuinely want to know your thought process in this. Watching this episode now, what stings for me as a disabled person, and I really wonder how differently abled and non-disabled people look at this, and particularly after listening to my review episode. And hey, once again, no judgment. My mind went there as well. My brain is still quite ableist after growing up in a very ableist family community and having quite a few experiences with our overall rather ableist society. Even though deep down, I know that my disability has no impact on my worthiness as a person. And yet, when you grow up in an ableist community society, a part of you starts to believe it's true. Hence the reason why I am in intense therapy right now. I have started to believe it to the point of near destruction. After knowing my worth, but still continuously being confronted by ableism. Do you remember how they reacted during COVID? Shall we say I was in need of some deep healing? I gotta say, now being in schema therapy, allowing myself to become fully aware of and learn how to strengthen, as they call it, my healthy adult Layla mode, for she is there, but she could use a boost. For when a community or a society holds these ableist viewpoints at their core, it directly impacts differently abled people, such as myself, not only in how others interact with us, but also how we ourselves view ourselves in relation to the world, which lays the foundation then for our own core health beliefs, which then, impacts how I function and how I interact with the world. In therapy, we are now working on weakening my maladaptive coping strategies to finally get back in touch with my core needs and feelings, to heal and to break my schema-driven dysfunctional behavioral patterns so that I eventually get to meet my core emotional needs in everyday life and no longer having to resort to what has now become dysfunctional coping. And to really drive home my point, all my maladaptive schemas that have become core held beliefs that are inaccurate, for they limit me in my development instead of helping me to thrive, are all directly linked to the ableist life I grew up in. These schemas start developing in your early childhood and then continuously get reinforced one way or another for them to be so ingrained in how I view myself and how I view the world. Yes, it started with the ableist family that I grew up with, but also the reinforcement that I got from the community that I grew up in. For let's not forget, ableism, such as racism, is taught behavior. It isn't something that you're born with. So, again, what I really hope that this episode at the very least does is make you think and possibly invite you to look at your own reasoning or maybe challenging your reasoning, as I did my own. For when I was watching this episode now, the way it's framed that Hannah's father is the obvious choice due to his physical disabilities slowing the burst of people down as they flee, by Teal'c removing that obstacle, he's inadvertently actually helping the burst of people, making my brain come to the conclusion that the writers try to imply that yes, Teal'c killed someone and that is bad, but by killing the gimpy one, he actually did them a favor. It stirred a certain unease within me, probably due to the fact that as a person with a disability, I have had, both directly and indirectly, been told that I was not invited, that I was considered an obstacle during social activities or events, that was the reason that I was either not invited or I was left behind, to the point that I started to believe that no one wanted to truly hang out with me because hanging out with me meant that you had to sacrifice your own enjoyment or experience or fun, which, as you can imagine, made me feel quite isolated, abandoned, alienated, and a giant burden that could do with removal. However, as I am now healing, my partially healed brain was like, wait a minute, why is Hana's father, as the gimpy one, the obvious choice? Here I am thinking that there are so many different choices you could have made in this situation. Not necessarily like this situation, but it would then not have necessitated killing the gimpy one. Which, the way it is written now, seems to have made it the obvious, even slightly helpful decision in this current scenario. And I'm going to delve a little deeper into the disability aspect of it all, but there are also other aspects from a non-disabled perspective that I will highlight as well. Again, just to invite you to think on it concerning these kinds of scenes and these kinds of storylines. For instance, this time around, I challenged myself. Okay, what kind of reasoning would have been possible as well if you eliminate the disability aspect of it all? And what would my reasoning and the obvious choice be then? The fact that my ableist and apparently also their ableist brains conceived this as the most logical, viable, easiest solution, and even framed it in such a way that though it is bad, actually what Teal'c did was help these people, to me makes this a double whammy and doubly important to expand on, as I have been doing in this episode a lot. Like I said, I do it with love, for one, but also really to invite you just to examine your own thought processes, your own reasoning, to expand your thinking. That's all I'm asking. Expand your thinking. It's an invitation. And yes, I will have an opinion, of course, obviously, like Kano said in this episode, how can anyone ever be completely impartial? But I'm also a professional. So I know how to separate my own opinion from my professional opinion. And there, yes, is a difference, or at least a way to go about things. I mean, I'm very passionate and I have a very clear opinion. Yes, I know that. But I can also be quite diplomatic and have a conversation. I enter conversations with curiosity. If we have a different opinion, I really want to understand someone's reasoning, someone's thought processes. And maybe in doing that, I learn something new and I change my opinion. It has been known to happen. Not often, but it has happened. For, again, like, knowledge is power. Sharing knowledge is powerful. There's this guy, I forget his name. I think I already mentioned him before. For reals, something that I thought was fucking impossible, proven that it can be done. It was a black man that made Ku Klux Klan members see the fucking light. Is that a diplomatic way to phrase it? but he had a conversation with people who were self-proclaimed Ku Klux Klan members, and if anything, they are infamous for their narrow and close-mindedness. So to crack that puppy open, wowza. But he, as a black man, found a way not only to talk to them with respect, but get that respect in return and actually have them, yes, have an awakening and turn away from the Ku Klux Klan lifestyle, if you want to call it a lifestyle. Oh, semantics. But there I go, expanding once again. Lord have mercy. I really need to cut this episode up or something. I don't know. And once again, I loved this episode because of the redemption arc concerning Teal'c, but it wasn't until my partially healed brain watched this episode now that I thought, what the actual fuck? Clearly, you are implying and reaffirming the belief that people with disabilities are less than and are considered more easily disposable. That way of thinking is very dangerous. And also a slippery slope. At one point, does someone cross that line of, you're now the person that we get rid of because you hold us back the most? And like I said, I hope that this Stargate episode, but also this review episode, at the very least, makes you think and invites you to challenge some of your own core health beliefs, if only to find out where they come from. As in, did you grow up being told this, or is this a belief that you have acquired all on your own through experiencing life, or that you've seen a loved one of yours lead? I'm not trying to condemn anyone or anything. All I'm asking is become aware of your thoughts, of your core health beliefs, and, I don't know, maybe become aware of how those might impact people who believe or think differently. And if that somehow makes you think like, maybe I should work on that, please do. You're never too old or too late to learn. Well, when you're dead. But like I mentioned before, if you believe in reincarnation, if you don't at first succeed, try again. Okay, maintaining the disability arc. In my opinion, what could have been done differently to eliminate the necessity or favor that Teal'c does these people and would eliminate the whole fucking obvious reason to kill the Gimpy one, for instance, would be they could have resided, set up shop a little further away from the gate to give them a head start. They could create a hidey hole closer by where they maybe could not have hidden the entire town, where someone who is less mobile can hide out while the others who can run fast as fuck distract them or lead them away. There were so many alternatives other than killing the Gimpy one. Do you feel my point? Completely eliminating the disability aspect are the reasons that would have justified Teal'c's choice of killing that particular person. I am going to be pissing off a few people. Bear with me. One of my first thoughts was kill the eldest person of the crew, but that would have set the elderly, and they would then rightfully so call me an ageist. Just because you kill off the elderly because they've already lived a long while, maybe you kill off someone who is the last person of the entire village who possesses a certain valuable piece of information. What if Hano's father was the only, blacksmith of the town, and now with his death, they have lost all of that knowledge? Okay, maybe kill off a kid. People can have more children. I mean, in the olden days, people with zero birth control would have like 10, 15 kids. And in my own family tree, I've discovered that if one of the kids in the first 4 or 5 years would die and they would have another kid of the same gender, they would like slap the same name on that kid. Like rinse and repeat, or recycle and repeat, or whatever. But who kills a baby? So hard no on that one as well. Okay, then I kept thinking, what's another reason? If a kid still has both of their parents, maybe kill one of the parents. They at least still have one caregiver to give. But like, who kills a parent in front of a kid, right? Also, not a valid option. So round and round my brain went, and I could not, for the life of me, find an argument that would sit right with me. And that only pissed me off all the more that the current narrative somehow did. Only highlighting, again to me, how fucking ableist we view people with disabilities. We are viewed as less than, inferior to, obstacles to your potential, more easily disposable of. That is where I land. Where do y'all land? Like, honestly, I genuinely want to know. Is this just me? Okay, I called it several times, but seeing that the episode is now over an hour, I have decided to cut it in half. There is still so much to discuss, highlight, love upon. So after this weighty topic, I invite you to sit with all the thoughts and feelings that this episode gave you. By all means, come share them on our accompanying Instagram account, Let's Review with Layla and You. And I will be back with part 2 of the Stargate SG-1's 16th episode, Cor-ai. For additional reviews and content on a variety of subjects in addition to this franchise, come check out our podcast channel, as well as our Instagram account, Let's Review with Layla and You. For additional in-depth content, as well as provide us with a place for reciprocation where we can all share and exchange our ideas, thoughts, and whatever else we feel like sharing with the world. So come meet up with me, myself, and I, drop a comment, give us a follow, and come share what y'all think. And to truly make this the all-inclusive podcast we set it out to be, come visit us in the RSS community where all our episodes come with a transcript. I do hope to see you there!